All right, we are now recording. And, Ruby has really blossomed. And I think input and participation from all of you have really been an integral part of that.
Thank you.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
I am a teacher in addition to the research director at Ruby. I also teach college at Eastern Washington University in Washington State and Walla Walla University, also in Washington State. I teach history and politics there. I am also a practicing attorney, although I do that as little as possible. And I'm also an itinerant preacher. So if I start straying into that sort of thing, rein me back, rein me in.
You're sort of like F. Lee Bailey and Billy Graham combined.
Appreciate it, Anthony. I'm going to share my screen now. I've got a little PowerPoint. Not much for PowerPoints, but I broke down this evening for one. Is everybody seeing that? Okay.
Looks good.
Welcome to Potholes, Grumps, and Cable Television. Why really the Democrats struggle in rural and why then Republicans don't really have to compete as a result. So first of all, I think for those of us who live in rural America and have lived elsewhere as well, we're having a different experience as Americans. Digitally, our digital lives are pretty similar. The internet and television, as we'll circle back to, have created an ecosystem where we're having similar experiences that way. But on the ground, our lives are quite different. I've spent quality time in a bunch of America's greatest cities, but I grew up in Eastern Washington harvesting hay and wheat off the Palouse, and I now live way up in the mountains. You might see I live in a teepee, really more wilderness than rural even. The local town has about 300 people, and it's a long way to a hospital or a grocery store. But we're having very different experiences in the cities. There's a lot of people around. You come in contact with a lot of folks. Um, and in rural places, we see fewer people, but I also know the names of everybody who works at the local grocery store. I have a favorite parking spot out in front of the hardware store, immediately out in front of the front door, so I can keep an eye on the dogs while I'm in there getting nails. That's a different experience than the 45 minutes it usually took me to find a parking spot in San Francisco. So we're having very different experiences. There was some research that came out in 2019 with some follow-up in 2021 by Will Wilkerson at the Niskanen Center that said that the thing that determines party affiliation the most or correlates most strongly out of anything is the population density of where you live. And I think this is because we're having a different experience on a daily basis than each other. Out here, where I live, there's less of a need. There's less pressure for rules and regulations that govern our relationships with other people. I don't see another person unless I go into town. So it doesn't occur to me or anybody living out here that we need more rules, excuse me. I grew up in a town with three stoplights. It only had one when we moved there, but it got three. That seemed like too much. And you don't need as many stoplights in a small town as you do in San Francisco. But when I lived in Los Angeles, and driving foolishly, driving a manual transmission in Los Angeles in stop and go traffic, I would on the daily think, how can we govern this traffic better? We need more rules and regulations. When we live in close contact with each other, that occurs to us more readily than it does out in the rural parts of the country. And to the extent that one of the parties is thought of by default as the party of rules and regulations, as the Democrats often are, that's going to have less purchase in rural America just because our daily lives, it doesn't occur to us as much. There's not as much pressure for those types of interventions. So we are dealing with a fundamentally different experience on the ground when it comes to rural and urban America, and that seeps through to our politics as well. I think we're all familiar with a map like this. Little blue dots in kind of a sea of red. That's how American politics looks almost every election. Why is that divide so stark? And what do we do about it? The problem is that in rural America, we have something like one-party rule in our cities, in our counties, if you have a rural enough state. And one-party rule does not serve rural people very well. If the parties are not fighting over our votes, both believing that they can compete where we live, the political system is not going to be as responsive as it could be to us, right? What are the states that really get a lot of attention? Where there's competition in the presidential races, the swing states get a lot of attention, not just presidential candidates traveling to them, but also policies catering to those populations because it's competitive. And when our politics is not competitive where we live, we are going to see a less responsive political system to us, to our needs. So this map is trouble because it's one-party rule in a lot of different places, urban and rural. We're here to talk about rural America more, but both of those places have one-party rule in a lot of different ways. And it creates a civic system that is not as responsive to our needs. There's a whole bunch of reasons why the system isn't responsive to our needs, but that's one of them. Now, 2 years ago, almost exactly, 3 years ago, excuse me, boy, time flies, we released this report, Can Democrats Succeed in Rural America? And as part of this report, I and others at Ruby spent 2 years interviewing rural candidates who had run in rural races all across the country, in a bunch of different states. Talked to more than 50 candidates, and all of them had something in common. They had in common that they'd outperformed the partisan lean in their jurisdiction, whatever was relevant. And we talked to people who were running statewide campaigns as well as local campaigns. And these Democrats and independents had outperformed the partisan lean, did dramatically better than you'd expect based on how their place typically votes for Democrats. And we learned a bunch of things. And that report is on the website. It's in 3 parts. There's an executive summary, part 1, our original research, and then Erica put together an amazing compendium of other research supporting what we had found. For this research that we're here to talk about tonight, we kind of went back to a similar well, but we thought, why is there such a penalty for being a Democrat in rural places? I don't know if any of you watched or listened to Jared Abbott's podcast with Ezra Klein, but there's a massive penalty, and I think we all know this anyway. There's a massive penalty for being a Democrat in rural America. Why is that? What is so dysfunctional about the Democratic Party brand? And more writ large, what is going on in rural politics? What is working well and what is not working well? Our focus in this research was not solely on what's going wrong for the Democratic Party, but that was a huge part of what we found and what we studied. And it's what we're predominantly going to talk about tonight, because no matter where you start from, and I start from, I think our political system should serve everyone well. If you think that, then what is going wrong for Democrats in rural America is a crucial question to answer, because until we figure that out and until Democrats do better, we're going to have one-party rule in rural America. So what did we do in this research? Just really briefly, we looked at rural counties in 6 different states: Arizona, Georgia, Montana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. and we talked to 49 rural leaders, kind of every stripe. We talked to Republicans, we talked to Democrats, we talked to faith, business, tribal leaders, we talked to media members, talked to a bunch of different types of people. We talked to a few candidates again, but these were mostly non-candidates. There were people directly involved in the political system, chairs of local Democratic committees, local Republican committees, tribal leadership. But there were also people who are just sort of tangential to our political system, aren't really. In fact, there are several people who were very reluctant to talk to us because they didn't want to get embroiled in politics. I'm sure you've heard that before. But we talked to a lot of different kinds of people about what is going on in their neck of the woods, fundamentally, in terms of our politics. How do the people there view Democrats and Republicans, and why? And let me get to, we interviewed all of them for an hour plus each. And when we started this process, it was quite formal. The questions we were asking were pretty formal. But then we learned that when we ask a formal question, we get a formal answer. And what we really wanted was people to riff and share their true feelings and true insights with us. And so we started asking questions like, what's the scuttlebutt in your neck of the woods on the political parties? And more open-ended questions. And we got some really amazing data in the form of commentary. So I'm going to share some of that with you tonight. It's really just a snippet. There's a ton that's going into this report, but this is just a snippet that's most relevant to what is going on for Democrats in rural America, and have a little solutions section at the end. What do we do about it? So, what are the findings? Fundamentally, first of all, keep something in mind, because I think we forget about this in our politics all the time. People are human beings. We have a shared humanity that I think sometimes we forget. We think that we are fundamentally different from people on the quote unquote other side of the political spectrum. And what we found is we are not. We're really not that different from each other. We differ really on, like 5% of political issues when it comes to policy. Most people agree on most things, is the reality in America. The media and our politicians focus on that 5% that we disagree. But for the vast majority of folks, there's agreement across the board on most things. And everyone has the same types of hopes and dreams and worries that are both practical and impractical. I'm a great worrier, so I worry about a lot of things that are impractical to worry about. But people have many, many common things that they worry about in terms of the practical things of living life. Can I get my kid to school on time? Can I put a good meal on the table? Is my drinking water clean? Right? These are really normal things that everyone thinks about and cares about and worries about if they need to be worrying about it. But here let's dive into some real findings. First of all, most people, part of being a human being, and I can't stress this enough, and we should self-reflect, people on this call. The people on this call are really not normal. There's nothing wrong with this, nothing wrong with being abnormal, but really, we're really not normal in terms of American politics. Most people do not, in their spare time, engage voluntarily with the American political system. That is not a thing that most Americans do. They are assaulted by it every election season, or sometimes when they turn on the news, but they really are trying to avoid it as best as they can. So we are outliers on this call today, and to the extent that people do express frustration about the political system, it almost is always stemming from either what we'll get to in several slides from now, cable news, or the local stuff. Literally the potholes. Spokane, Washington, near where I live, is known for having terrible roads. Lots and lots of potholes. People complain about it. It's a constant complaint. And so the people I know who are working in city government, it's a huge thing on their to-do list as well. but the concerns that we bring to the table when we're talking to people about politics should stem almost entirely from whatever local issue is going on in your neck of the woods. That's really, really, really key because people care most about what's going on in their neck of the woods, the potholes in the road, literally and figuratively, what is going on locally with you. And to the extent that we are campaigning in a place that's not our home, we'll get to why it's so important to be a listener later. But one of the reasons is because we might not know where we're campaigning. We might not know what the local concerns are. They might be different from where we are. Now, we do have some commonality across all humanity, as I mentioned, but a lot of times, where I live right now is timber country, right? It's timber harvest is a huge industry here, really the only industry other than jobs at the dam, for instance. But that's not true of where I grew up, where it's a major agricultural center in terms of grain products. So there's a lot of different kinds of local concerns that are not the same for everyone. So being focused on the local concerns, and to the extent that we are bringing something else to the conversation, that might be a distraction because, again, people are not recreationally engaging with politics very much, and they are not enjoying it. I'll tell you that. Now, there's a fair amount to unpack on this slide. Democrats in rural should remember that there are actually a fair number of Democrats in rural America. It's not a majority, but it's more than you may think. And so there is actually more commonality, even if we're thinking about our political identities, there's more commonality amongst your neighbors than you may assume. But there are a number of challenges. And I'm sorry, I'm going to have to change the screen here for a second. I'm going to bring up my notes. Can you all still see the slides, though? I'm not seeing any nodding heads.
Yes.
Okay. There are a number of challenges at the local level when it comes to how the Democratic Party is functioning. And unfortunately, this is the slide that we're working with in terms of talking about that. But at the local level in rural America, I'm sure you've noticed, there is a fair amount of dysfunction in how the Democratic Party, the formal party is functioning. There are really two models that I've encountered in talking to local committees. And I'm going to try to be delicate about this. The first, that is not very functional, is something that I think has devolved into something akin to group therapy almost. There is an assumption that there's not very many other Democrats around, and there's a feeling of powerlessness. And so there's a very insular group therapy, for lack of a better term, going on. And there are a couple different things that this is stemming from. One is that when we get into a niche hobby or civic pursuit, like politics often is, we develop specialized knowledge and jargon, language that's not common amongst everybody else. And when a new person comes in the door, they encounter all of this specialized information and jargon, and their eyes kind of glaze over, and that's not very welcoming. And so to the extent that we are having these insular groups that are functioning sort of as a group therapy session, politically, a group therapy session, we are not offering something welcoming to people who might want to get engaged but don't know all the right terms. And so that's a really a big problem that our interviewees talked about in terms of their local committees. Another one is that a lot of times, the old saying, power corrupts, even a little bit of power does. Oftentimes party leaders at the local level and of course, not just the local level, but certainly at the local level too, are kind of power tripping. And it's a big part of our identity, often our politics and our involvement in the local party. And so we want to be the gatekeeper, and we want to have everything come through us. We want to really control the way that the local party functions. And that's a big turnoff to folks in terms of when you bring new ideas into a place. You like to at least have a hearing and maybe think through some new ideas that maybe aren't the way that people have done it before. But a lot of times local leaders are very entrenched, and they don't want to relinquish any of that control. So that's a big issue as well that came up in a lot of our interviews. And then lastly, something that's not unique to rural, but I think it's more acute in the rural political space, is that oftentimes we have people who are transplants, not from the local community, and they have a lot of energy, and it's great. And they may get into positions of power at the local committee level, but they don't quite understand rural America in general or the local community specifically. And so there's really a language disconnect and an action disconnect, maybe, and a way of thinking disconnect. They haven't noticed, for instance, that there's not as much of a need for traffic lights as there was where they came from. So those are three things that in terms of the dysfunction of the local parties, those are three things that are really driving a huge part of the problem. Another thing that happens in dysfunctional local Democratic parties is, this may seem like a small thing, but it's not. A belief that door knocking is either too dangerous or too time consuming to engage in. Now, I know that knocking doors in rural is different than in the city or the suburbs because the doors are farther apart. But I'll tell you what, the local Democratic committees who are really flourishing in rural are knocking doors. There is no substitute for in-person communication. There's really not, because that is where we most often find our shared humanity and recognize, oh, this person is a person like me with the same cares and concerns. And so door knocking is so important because when it comes to campaign season, voters are much more responsive to door knocking, in-person communication, than they are to the barrage of texts and phone calls that we're all getting and emails. I've had to abandon an email address to political emails at this point. So in person, but also the people knocking the doors are transformed by the process themselves. It's not just in terms of a voter outreach thing. It's also that it changes the way that we engage. And lastly, just in terms of local Democratic Party dysfunction, is there's way too much sort of bickering and pettiness. I don't know how else to put that, but we were regaled with a number of stories of what can only be described as bickering and pettiness in terms of not just internally, right? There's a lot of internal conflict, or there can be, but also between Republicans and Democrats. When a party is outnumbered in terms of registration and voting, like the Democrats are in rural, it typically, there are exceptions to this, but it typically does not play very well to be an acrimonious person, to be a fighter, to be bickering and petty about things. It's better to be the person at Thanksgiving who, instead of starting the argument with Uncle Ned, is the person that says, hey, wait a second. Are you hearing what he's saying, though? Are you hearing what she's saying? You see, you have some of the same concerns and cares here. To be the peacemaker is really the more powerful position, much more powerful posture. And then there are a handful of local Democratic committees that we talked to who are flourishing. And the reason they're flourishing and the spirit in which they are flourishing can only be described as missional, mission work. This, of course, is a picture of Mormon missionaries, but the concept of being outgoing in that way, specifically in a way that downplays sort of the self we are bringing to the mission and saying, look, I can be focused on the mission in the face of discomfort, in the face of somebody disagreeing with me to my face, but to keep a sort of missional pressure on in the face of all that is something that is common to the Democratic Party committees who are succeeding in rural America right now. All right. Now, cable television. One of the things we're all fighting against, and all understand, I think, probably pretty clearly, is that the advent of cable television has done two things. It's nationalized our politics so that AOC, a member of the U.S. House from New York, is a household name across the country. So it's nationalized our politics, but it's also siloed us in a lot of different ways, similar to the way that the internet, you can find anything to support anything really on the internet. Cable television, of course, you can find any channel to really agree with you and to kind of stoke your default energies, whatever they may be. Unlike decades ago, where we had, more balance on the nightly news. Now you can just watch nonstop 24/7, a channel that supports your views. So we cannot get away from the fact that there are these other things driving the problem, but there is this background noise of our media environment that is really driving a lot of, to the extent that people are not talking about the pothole down the street, they're talking about somebody across the country that they've never met and will never meet. There is a nationalization of our politics and what's going on. So I hope to have tons of time. Oh, we're doing great on time. Awesome. Hope to have tons of time for questions. And I cannot see the chat. I'm sorry if there's something I should be responding to right now, but I cannot see the chat while I've got this. I'm technologically challenged enough where I'm blind to the chat at this moment, but we'll get back to it. So, solutions. One of the things that I'm really excited about that Ruby is doing is Community Works. And we have our Community Works director on the call this evening. She runs, I think, a monthly introduction. If you haven't heard of Community Works, I'm going to give you a tiny little snippet about what it is. But what I was really excited to find, we had started this pilot program at Ruby called Community Works, where we were partnering with several different counties in Virginia and Georgia to get folks who are normally plugging in politically to also engage in their communities in ways that are not inherently non-political. Food drives, work bees, all sorts of different kinds of efforts in their local community. What does your local community need? They know best. Engage in that way, and you still bring your political identity to that work, but it's not political work. It's really a community service type of effort. And what I was very excited to see is that the Democratic Party committees that were succeeding with a missional attitude were doing this type of work, not just campaigning during campaign election season, but engaging with their community all year round, every year, in ways that are just fundamentally helpful and not just political. So this is available, I think, to all of us as individuals. But there's also Ruby is now opening up the program. I won't say too much, but opening up the program in ways that you can get involved and start a chapter in your neck of the woods. And this is a really powerful thing. Not only does it create connection with your local community between you and your group and your local community, it also brings a lot of people in to the process, just the civic process in general, who would not otherwise be engaged. That's what we're seeing, these massive increases in volunteers in the communities where we are currently operating. And that's also what the local committees have seen, where they are doing it across the country that are not necessarily affiliated with what we're doing here at Community Works, but who are doing a very similar effort. So that's been a big part of what the research found as contributing to a healthy civic life. And here's just really three things about Community Works. It makes neighbors out of activists. Now, I want to put this delicately, but here's the thing about I am guilty of this too. But if you have ever described yourself as an activist, you might be part of the problem. That type of energy is preachy, for lack of a better term, coming from somebody who preaches on the weekends. Being preachy is not very accessible to folks, and it typically is a turnoff. So activism, something that I, as a history teacher and a politics teacher, there's some really great examples in American history of successful activism and activism that really changed things. But in terms of making connections in a place where we are politically out of our depth, being a neighbor first is really fundamental to success. But Community Works also solves real problems and it cultivates community. So it really is every time I see something that Meredith's putting out about the work that's being done in those counties, I get a little teary because it's really a beautiful thing. So I encourage you to engage with that and to explore that some more. I just want to reiterate door knocking. There is nothing better than actual in-person contact with folks. The text banking, I've done that. The phone banking, I've done that too. That is the postcard writing, the letters to the editor. Those are all important ways to engage, but they pale in comparison to the sort of connection you can make knocking at the doors. And if I remember my next slide correctly, yes, key, both in general and while knocking doors, is to be a listener first. Some of our most successful interviewees, both in this round of interviews, but also when we were interviewing candidates, which would knock doors with absolutely no script or agenda, but just to listen. Hey, I'm so-and-so running for such and such, or I'm part of the local Democratic committee or whatever. And I'm just here to hear what's going on with you and what your concerns are and what you'd do if you could change things. That's really just approaching with questions. I think Erica mentions this on her presentations, but the reality in terms of our contact with other people with whom we may disagree is people do not remember what we say, like the details of what we say. They don't remember what we say. They remember instead how we make them feel. And listening, being a listener first is a really wonderful way to make people feel heard, which is, I think, a very important thing in politics in general, but it's specifically in rural America. We're almost to the end here. I'm excited to see a hand up already. And I want to reiterate something I said at the very beginning. We really are the same. We have a shared humanity, and our concerns are much more similar than you may assume from your contact with others. And finally, our motive also matters in terms of people are pretty insightful. And if we are engaging in the political process to extract votes, to mine votes, that comes across. If we are instead engaging because we care about our community, we love our neighbors, that comes across too. And that's the hardest work of all. This is not a tactic. This is not a strategy. This is a heart thing. And why are we in the game? I think is a thing to ask ourselves. So I think we got a ton of time for questions. And I see Michelle, right? I'm going to stop sharing. and we can start getting in the chat. And Michelle, go ahead.
Oh my gosh, thank you. And I do apologize if my dog barks because she's really mad at me for working all day.
That too.
Listen,
So
everybody, this has been very inspiring to be here. My name is Michelle Rathman. I've been working in rural health for over 30 years. I host the Rural Impact podcast. Tomorrow we have a huge event, live stream event, showcasing the work of community across the state of Massachusetts. We are talking about the critical importance of federal investments in state organizations of rural health. Everyone doesn't realize right now, you guys, that rural health is about to just kind of disintegrate before our eyes. I won't go into it, but I know I've been doing it for a very long time. So tomorrow, when you talk about community engagement, contact your local community, your federally qualified health clinic. It exists in your community, your critical access hospital, your public health department. Reach out, ask them how you can support them and what they need you to carry with them in your advocacy work. That is the best advice I can give everybody right now. Unsolicited, I understand, but I will take grace in your forgiveness of interrupting your time with this message. This matters more than anything that I can tell you. I am deeply, deeply embedded in rural health policy, and I am here to tell you the pain is real. All the other things, they matter too. But we didn't decide which shift to rise to the top of the situation. They did it for us. Your rural communities are going to see, uh, we have the event tomorrow is called the Rural Effect, which is designed to show the positivity that can happen from the investments of federal dollars into states that then deploy them to ensure equity in vaccines and funding of rural health clinics that cares for everybody we love and care about. And yet it floats to the bottom because there's so much other shift happening above us. So I may say there's a lot of things. Potholes are important. Hell yes. We endure that. This is a life-changing, life-altering trajectory for our country. And I'm just asking everyone to stay focused on the policy that's about to take the shift down for the rest of us where our healthcare is concerned. And the changes that are happening with Medicare and SNAP, they're not shiny. They're a bit abstract because it's kind of the future. But weren't we saying this was going to happen a few years ago when Project 2025 set sail? So I encourage this group, and maybe I'm off cuff here, and you folks at Ruby who know me, I say this with all my heart and soul and intensity. We have to stay laser focused on the things that are about to alter our futures beyond almost repair.
yeah,
Defunding of healthcare is right up there with the things that the fire hoses that we got to carry around. So with that, I appreciate your time and thank you for
thank you.
carrying your voices.
I think for a lot of folks, healthcare is a pothole issue, though. I mean, where I live, there's one little clinic here in the nearest town, and
A
they really have a hard
sinkhole. It's
time.
like one of those things that just implodes. It just takes them right into the ground. It's gone.
Yeah, they
It's
really have a
gone.
hard time keeping a provider there because of the patient base, and then the closest hospital is an hour away, so
Yes.
it really is a pothole issue
And
here.
none of this was by their designs, and this is what's so important to realize. And so right now it's like triage or like surveying the damage already. Because the other thing I want to remind everyone is that the defunding of all these programs also means, so if the money comes back, oh, and I feel bad. You guys cut me off, like do the yank of the off the stage. But the reality is that time is short. These programs have been defunded, but if the funding comes back, the staff is gone. This is a reality. It's not a trade secret or anything like that. The reality is that the infrastructure has been severely damaged. And so at this point, because there's so many things that are so offensive, maybe us coming together as a group of people, not identifying as anyone, but human beings who deserve dignity in healthcare and so many other things. But I just encourage everyone, because we're talking about rural that's underfunded, under-resourced already in so many ways. Maybe this is something that tomorrow is National Rural Health Day. Join any event you can, call your local healthcare organization and ask how you can help them bend the ear of the person who represents them in Congress. So with that, I'm going to shut up because you all have been so damn patient. Ooh, sorry. Strike that from the record.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, and one of the tricky things about healthcare too, or really any policy, is that to the extent that most people engage with politics, it's really not on a policy level. And there's actually some wisdom there because they know that politicians can say whatever they want on the stump and then do completely something different once they get in office. And so there is actually a policy disconnect when it comes up, as it often does in terms of healthcare, for instance, when a hospital closes, then there is some engagement on that specific issue. But writ large, policy is sort of this black hole that we spend a lot of time on, but is not necessarily really productive. I want to go to Kathy next, and then there's a couple.
Like an airplane, when the door closes, it's too late.
Right.
The plane takes off without you. So the
No,
time to care about your hospital is not when the doors are about ready to close. It's too late.
yeah. No, thank you for that, Michelle. Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you. I found this fascinating, and I love the way you presented it and laid it out. So I'm curious. You see this in the Democratic Party, the local. How do you move that in another direction?
Yeah. Well, I do think that I mean, community with the solutions I talked about at the end, community works. I'm tooting a horn really loudly, and it's one horn, but the thing about community works is that not only is there engagement with the local community, so we're moving the needle with the people we're engaging with, but we're also changing as civic actors ourselves, right? It is transformational of us at the same time. So you're getting it coming and going there. And that's really powerful. But I think there is there unfortunately, I think in a lot of places, right, the national concept of Democrats is driving a lot. And to the extent that local Democrats are distinguishing themselves from what the maybe the national focus is, that can be also powerful. That's a tricky thing, right? Because it actually weakens, at least in the short term, it weakens the party locally. And so that's got to be used really judiciously. But in terms of engaging in non-political ways in the local community, it's hard to beat that. I mean, that is really the model of success that we found in this research. I'm sorry, I'm not offering anything new there, Kathy, but that I cannot stress that enough. I wanted to
Oh,
we'll
right.
come back. We'll come back. We've got some great hands there. Oh, go ahead, Kathy. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm just thinking in terms of scaling. I've spent most of the last year kind of researching local organizing within state parties because, David Pepper has said that that is the best thing that we can do to boost the party. And it seems like there are some state Democratic chairs who are trying to do that, but there are so many obstacles. And I'm just wondering how to get your model out to them, out to the people within the state Democratic parties who might be able to introduce that model on a broader scale.
Yeah, look, when we first talked about this concept, running this pilot program, my hope was the Democratic Party would pick it up and do it I mean, just stop doing anything else but this. I'm kind of on a hobby horse here, but it'd be like a Democratic dynasty for a decade until the Republicans figure out how to respond. But to me, you want to win everywhere all the time. This is the model for it. I really love.
Cody, can I add something to that, Kathy? We have been working to get this across the country. We started in 2 states. We're now in 6. We'll probably be in 10 by early next year. what we're pushing for is to get the DNC, the National Party, and organs like the Association of State Democratic Committees, which represent all the state parties, to adopt this type of model, whether it's our specific model of community works, which we think is the best, but it can be others that promote this kind of year-round non-political engagement as part of rebuilding trust. There's a lot of effort behind that, but what we need is lots of other people saying, hey, there's a model out there. We need to get our state party, our national party to embrace it. That's the missing piece. Sorry, Cody.
I want to do one comment from the chat, and then we'll do our hands here. I also wanted to say hello, Jeff, referencing the hospital in Ritzville. You're in my neck of the woods, so get in touch if you'd like. I'd love to get in touch locally. John Sonnen said something I really want to highlight here. He said the problem for Democrats in rural is a lack of focus on individualism. Yes, that's a huge part of it. How do we, and I'm building my own house. I'm homesteading out here. I'm trying to do as much as possible of my own self. That there is an individualistic spirit in rural America, but there is also so important to community. I get water from the neighbor because I don't have my own water source, and so there's these local connections. That how do we meld both individualism and I don't like the term empowerment, but finding power in ourselves with then collectivism as well. So that is the balance there. But John, that's a great point. Bruce, you're first in line here.
Yeah, a couple of quick things. I mean, I think one of the most important things about the Republican Party is they actually have a social ecosystem that is apart from the political stuff. My grandfather was a Republican. My father is a Republican. The fire department is Republican. The sanitation department is Republican. There's a whole ecosystem of relationships that have nothing to do with politics, but the fact is, that they're Republicans, and the Democrats don't seem to do that. The other thing is they're basically sort of campaigning all year round. So they're involved in Toys for Tots, or they're doing something in the community all year round, where the Democrats tend to show up, around election time. And some of the candidates that I'm seeing be successful are ones who actually do something apart from campaigning. They run a food bank or Meals on Wheels, or they've got a little van that runs around to the smaller communities with books for kids. Here, take some free books. And then when you knock on the door and introduce that person, you go, oh, I saw you at the food bank. Oh,
Yep.
your kids are reading the books that you gave me. I mean, that's really important. So there's some wine in the bottle. It's not just like 2 months before, the election, you go, can I have your vote? And you go, I remember door knocking, and one guy said, oh, I didn't know it was election season. That's the only time anybody ever knocks on my door. That's it.
100%, Bruce. That's a great comment. Shirley Grossman, good to see you. It's been a while. I've missed the monthly meetings. I'd really like to get down there, but I'm too far north.
I'm so sorry. We do miss you, Cody.
Good to see you, though.
You know what we're doing? We're doing billboards and digital media to try to get, because we've been so concerned about the lack of knowledge or understanding of what truth is. And so we've been doing, we have about 10 billboards that are 7 that are up now, and we're going to have 10. And we're also doing the digital thing where we have young people who know what they're doing. They're doing the streaming out to various demographics and trying to tell some facts about what our Mr. Baumgartner has really voted for.
I love it.
Hurtful. So anyway,
don't give up on the in-person though, Shirley. Shirley last year did a tour around a bunch of the local rural counties here in Eastern Washington. It was a really wonderful thing. Nancy, I'm coming to you next, but let me answer a quick question from Holly in the chat. How effective are outsiders that come to canvas in rural areas? It depends on the person. And are they coming with a posture of listening and curiosity, or are they coming with a posture of let me educate the rubes? So that's really the thing it turns on. Nancy, go ahead.
I live in Albuquerque, and it's not rural. And I wonder what the best way would be for people in cities who are not rural, who are more urban, to affect change?
Yeah, we are really working on this. We just had a mini board retreat last weekend where we were trying to tackle this question. There is room for canvassing in a rural place, coming from the cities, but it really is, like I just said to Holly's question. It really is about what posture are you bringing to it, what attitude are you bringing to it, because I mean, nobody likes to have somebody not from their community come in and tell them, you know, try to educate them. I mean, that's just the human nature. Um, and I would like to see, and we would like to see as an organization, more exchange of ideas across the rural-urban divide. I think there's a lot of working class concerns that bind us together, that we have in common. Um, so it is about, I mean, but there's always room for a friendly face. If you're bringing your curiosity and you're listening, and just making a human connection.
But where do I bring it to? I mean, like,
Well, don't give up on building power and organizing in Albuquerque either. But certainly, uh, look up a local Democratic committee in one of your rural counties surrounding, and get in touch with them. Hey, I've got some energy. I'm a friendly face. You look like a nice person to talk to. So, just say, hey, I'd love to come out and help however you need. I'm not bringing some agenda. I'm not going to preach at anybody. I'm just coming to help out however I can.
Cody, I'm going to jump in
thank
again.
you.
Sorry, Nancy. The other thing folks in cities and suburbs can do is just elevate the concerns of rural and working class people in your own area. We tend to silo policy wise. We have a rural New Deal. There's other groups that have put forward really thoughtful, effective platforms for restoring health to rural communities, to former Rust Belt places. If you would become familiar with them and then lift them up to your own representative, Ro Khanna, who lives in Silicon Valley, for God's sakes, is one of the most outspoken advocates of the rural New Deal. Imagine if we had more legislators from cities and suburbs who are also advocating for something like the rural New Deal. That would be huge. So that's something else you can do.
Now, by the way, nobody panic about the time. I'm happy to stay here until everyone else leaves. So don't. I know we're getting short on time. We're going to go to Roger next, but let me just highlight something that Tony Reynolds said in the chat. In our committee, Tony says we try to train new folks and pair them with an experienced member. Fantastic, fantastic model. That's a great one. Go ahead, Roger.
Yeah, I'm just another urbanist here who's here because I think what you're talking about is absolutely vital for America today. This is the rural democratic committees are on the front lines for the defense of democracy. And you've shared ideas that are similar to, distinct from, but similar to several other groups I've heard that are people are talking. But my question is, could county level democratic organizations benefit from a national network for sharing best practice ideas for how to reach out to more people in their communities? I'm sure that the ideal is this. You should be talking to a whole bunch of people who are already in the business of organizing in their counties, and they're going to respond to your ideas, and they're going to have other variations, and it's going to be a two-way conversation. Does such a network make sense, and if so, how does it get started? It should going beyond just one state, not just working through one party. It's okay for people in Utah to talk to people from Alabama.
Yeah, 100%. Roger, I love it. We are
How does it
trying.
happen?
Yeah, we are trying to be a resource center. I think this is kind of the next phase of what we're trying to do with the Community Works, is to try to be a resource hub for people who want to start getting engaged this way. We do have, working with people to start their own chapters of this type of thing. The sad thing, though, Roger, is that um, Democrats are pretty weak in rural, and there's just a ton of counties that have really defunct committees. There's just nothing functioning at all. There are a lot that have something functioning there, but there are a lot that just don't have anything really going on at all. I talked to several counties where it kind of had died off, and then there were a few individuals doing some things, but the committee itself wasn't doing much. And so, to the extent that I would love to have a network, but in terms of the nodes of that network, we actually don't have too many nodes in terms of like the grand scheme of things. We have a lot, thousands of counties in the country. We do have a lot of those nodes that are missing even from action at all. But I do think I'm hopeful that we can start to be a resource center for folks that want to do that. But the other thing is I love it. Let's do it. The tricky thing is this type of engagement, this community service type of engagement actually takes effort, right? It's so easy now to, post something on Facebook or, scream at somebody on Twitter that we are defaulting as a people, as a species. I'm guilty of this too, into like engaging that way rather than actually boots on the ground types of things. And so it is actually a much heavier lift to get people to engage this way. But I'm really hopeful about it. I think we're seeing such traction that way. And Randy, you've been so patient. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for this wonderful conversation. And your emphasis on face-to-face communication reminds me of the work of Bob Putnam.
Yes.
Right. All of you who have Netflix should go and see the movie Join or Die. It's an ominous name, but it makes the point that historically, the decline in civic participation, face-to-face organizations of all types, both political and non-political, is tied to a decline in commitment to democracy, both in this century and in the last century. You remember the Gilded Era? And in his new work, The Upswing, he talks about how, well, our ancestors had the same problem, and the way they solved it, one way, was to rebuild civic life through face-to-face communications. It worked for them, it can work for us, perhaps. So that's part one. See the movie, commit to this face-to-face thing you're talking about. One thing we did here in West Seattle just last week was we said, fine, we were going to hold a joiner jamboree. We got literally 60 local groups of all types together in a church basement. 1,000 people from the community came through. It was like speed dating for clubs, and it was amazing. The 34th District Democrats was in the corner and got more signups than we've ever seen before. So if you'd like to do that, it's a wonderful way to build community face-to-face. I don't know how to do it in a small town because I don't live there, but we'd love to try it. That's all.
I love it, Randy. Thank you so much for sharing that. Coming to Mary next, but let me read one thing from Roger, who just spoke before Randy, but he had an interesting question in the chat. Is there a problem in the relationship between the local committees and the larger party structures, including national consultants with their focus on nationally tested messages? 100%. It's just not a one-size-fits-all politics. They do not have the same potholes in New York City that we do out here. And so absolutely there is an assumption about culture and ways to engage politically with it coming out of national politics that just is not true, does not work. I question whether it works even at the national level or at any level, but it certainly doesn't work in rural. And so 100%, Roger, that's now some state Democratic organizations are really good. I talked to some states where I think South Dakota is doing this, where they actually will help pay for a local organizer if you can pony up the other half. At least they were doing that a couple cycles ago. I'm not sure what the current state of things is, but there are some state organizations that are really trying to make inroads in rural and doing things that make sense. Washington, Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, I know the organizer who did the organizing for several years and several cycles before she was elected. And so the Washington State Democratic Party made a commitment to that district to organize year round. And that resulted, I think, part of why Marie was able to get elected there. So There are some organizations, state level organizations that are doing things like that. But there is a huge disconnect. Yeah, Roger. Mary, go ahead.
Is that Mary Claire you're calling on?
Yes, you.
Yeah. Oh, hi. Sorry, I'm on my phone. I can't get my video going.
That's okay.
Yeah, this is Mary Claire. I am the chair of All Rise Alameda in Alameda, California, right across from San Francisco.
I used to live there.
In yes, 2017, we began with the Tracy Grassroots Organizing Team in Tracy, California, about an hour away from the Bay Area. And the original concept was year-round organizing and developing long-term relationships. So we've gone canvassing there for the last 9 years, also Modesto, Merced, Central Valley, and always taking the lead from the local folks that are there. And never, I don't think, maybe once in 10 years, I've been asked where I'm from. So that's not really an issue. And often we would start off the year asking, what are your concerns? What are you worried about? What's going on? What bugs you about what's going on in town? And that would feed back in. And then when it got to be get out the vote time, then we would do standard canvassing. So that model already exists. I don't know if you all have, so it's kind of the swing left model, basically. But there are all these swing left groups everywhere. I think they would probably adopt community works possibly faster than the Democratic Party itself. There's all these indivisible groups. Again, they might also be another source. We're going to look at what we can do with our Tracy Democratic Club. They've done things, bringing baskets of food to the farm workers who were laid off during COVID, and blood drives and all those other kinds of things like that. Given the new with Proposition 50, we're going to have some new districts to go to, and there's going to be more rural areas. So we are going to be looking to those areas to see where and how we can connect and support what's going on. And we always went in with the idea of follow the lead of the local folks. And like you were saying, that attitude, we're not there to teach or preach or whatever. We're there to support. So again, I don't know if you all have gotten connected with Swing Left or Indivisible, but that may be a pathway for this. So thanks.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I would have to defer to Meredith on specifically who we've gotten plugged in with, but I think there are definitely some local chapters that I think we have. Coming to SK Snow next, but just a 1 second, let me, Nick Jacobson had a really good question here in the chat. I understand that the listening has to come first, but I'm wondering how you think about quote unquote success in a conversation at a door. Are we talking, did we get a new Democrat for life or win an otherwise unexpected vote or just leave everybody feeling good? It seems to me that for the former, you also have to have something to say to people in addition to listening to them. Really, we could spend another hour on this question alone. But here's the deal. A lot of times it is incremental. You're planting a seed that's going to blossom later, right? I am very hesitant to think that from one conversation at the door where we listen almost entirely, that we're going to give a new Democrat for life. I'm not sure that's really the goal anyway, but there are Chloe Maxman, one of our colleagues in Maine, really had a good experience door knocking in rural Maine and got a lot of votes that were unexpected just from people showing up. I mean, the fact of the matter is, when we don't show up in a place for generations, they feel written off because they are. And so just showing up at the door is actually a huge gesture that means a lot to people. And so I think but I think it's an incremental work, right? This is nothing important comes quick and easy. I don't think, and so this is real deep organizing over time that bears fruit later. Sometimes immediately, but really later on. And I think that's okay. I mean, I think that's part of, the way that human civilization works. But I get
That was sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Nick.
That was very helpful. I think, yeah, I was being a little facetious about, Democrat for life. That's probably not going to happen. But I think what I was thinking about is, I mean, so I ran for state house in Pennsylvania, a very rural district last year. And when I started the campaign really with this mentality of, we're just going to listen, and with that's kind of going to be an opening. But I found by the end of the campaign, I felt like we'd had a lot of conversations where people more or less just vented, you know, about what they were angry about. And people are very angry about lots of things in politics these days. Uh, and I wondered by the end of it, okay, you have to do that listening. And obviously, I mean, it's actually good for people to feel like they can talk about what's on their mind. But by the end, we were trying, I think, to kind of redirect people's focus to the local issues that you began with. So okay, so I hear you're frustrated about the state of immigration in the country, but we have public schools in this community that with pretty amazing teachers who spend a lot of time working to better our lives, and our state government could be doing more to support them. So that's kind of what I was thinking, that the line between establishing an open relationship and just kind of absorbing a lot of anger and frustration in a way that maybe is cathartic, but isn't exactly kind of productive or doesn't leave people with an idea of, oh, yeah, there's another way.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Nick. As a candidate, I think you do there does come a time in the conversation where you talk about what you're
Yeah,
for.
right.
But the thing I tell candidates too, even about the venting, is that it does two really good things for you, which is it enhances your credibility just because that's what listening does with another human being, but it also sharpens you as a candidate because you understand much better what your community cares about and how to focus your campaign and like what to emphasize. But that's I mean that's a really important conversation, Nick. I really appreciate you engaging that way. That's really helpful. SK Snow, you're up.
Hey there. So I'm in Texas. I used to live on a farm. Uh, I'm very connected to rural areas. We're talking about towns of could be as small as 600 people, 2,000 people. And I feel like I'm hearing a lot of wishful thinking here. Um, there is so much animosity and suspicion and rhetoric around libtards and Biden and all the rest of that that I I I just don't think it's not as easy as you. It all sounds kind of pie in the sky, but the reality is, and you're talking about knocking on doors. I mean, the people I know have a shotgun next to their door, and they don't particularly care for a car or truck that they don't know, coming down their over their cattle guard, or knocking on their door. I mean, it's a very different. Um, they say Texas is like a whole other country. I mean, it's a very different culture in so many ways. I saw that somebody just asked in the chat about the white Christian nationalism in um, in rural areas. Um, Things are so much tied to people's faith and to people's churches. The the people who are doing good in the community are usually through church, whether they're doing things for whether they're providing food or putting out fires or helping build or helping veterans. Um, they're pretty. I was gonna say I don't want to say exclusively, but probably I might be right in saying exclusively connected to churches in some way. Um, so one is there. I how do you reach these people in a way that um, that they that aligns with what they see as their values. Like, even though we might want the same thing and might be willing to help someone in the exact same way, when it's articulated differently, it doesn't get through.
Hmm. Well, forgive me if I made it sound easy. It's definitely not easy. Um, this is hard work, and it's going to take a long time for to restore. Although politics does swing actually pretty quickly. I mean, Obama did pretty well in rural. Um, the I do want to just address the I know we're well armed out here too. Although I do understand Texas probably has a more gun to person, higher gun to person ratio, but the there is some real danger to door knocking in certain places by certain people too. You know, that's relevant as well. The identity of the door knocker, unfortunately.
Excuse me,
It's
there was one other really important point that I meant to make,
yeah.
which is, so if you live in a community like that, where you are really an outlier, um, people may, in the privacy of the voting booth, vote for Democratic candidates, but it is a whole other thing to live in your community and to out yourself as being a Democrat,
Yeah.
because people can be ostracized. Um, so that's a real concern.
Absolutely.
So
So
Cody,
yeah,
Cody,
yeah,
can I just
yeah.
offer that lots of people in our community works chapters face the same kinds of issues and roadblocks that you're talking about, SK. And I would love for you to, I'm thinking it's SK, that's what I'm seeing. Um, I would, love for you to come back on. I think you've signed up before for Community Works intro sessions, but to come back on and talk some about that, about how different people are dealing with those same concerns.
Thank you. I appreciate that you recognize that.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's all real for sure, SK. The thing that I would say though is there is a lot of different ways in which to out yourself as a Democrat in rural America. And I know people who say, "Hey, I can't even go into the local store and get a cup of coffee because, everybody looks at me dirty." Um, there are other ways to communicate though, political affiliation in a way that I mean, there are some people you're just never gonna, they're always gonna get mad and angry, and that's inevitable. But I think there are a lot of ways in which there are a lot of ways in which to introduce yourself in a way that opens some common ground and some possibility. That I mean, I've been in a place where I was not a political majority the vast majority of my life, and I talk to everybody about everything. And there's a way to get along with people. There really is. I know sometimes it doesn't seem like there is, but there really is a way to get along with people. I just saw Pam. I don't know if you're still here, but Pam Colmeyer, I just saw you. Good to see your name. It's been a minute, but good to see you.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Pam ran for state legislature in my neck of the woods here, and really, really lovely person and candidate. Mike, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say for the young lady, for Sky there in Texas, I'm as far north as you're going to get tonight. I live in Minnesota and I'm in northern Minnesota. So the things that I wanted just to mention was a couple things that I thought of on the door knocking. Sometime, and this happened going out helping with the campaign, but walk up to the door knowing right away that they're opposing us in everything. But the first thing was said was, ma'am, you really have some beautiful flowers here. How do you get these flowers to grow like this? I can't get mine to look like this. Oh, that's a whole different ballgame. And then even though that we disagree on a lot of things and wouldn't vote the same way, it still has instilled a little bit in her that, hey, he's not really a bad guy. So that can happen. The other thing, because I work in the fair booths over the years, the Republicans are only one booth away. and I always get a lot of, fingers, or I might get some things. But every time I have a conversation with somebody, and I always make sure to say thank you and put my hand out to shake their hand. They don't know what to do because nobody's offered them a hand for a handshake to say thank you. And I do that all the time. And you get a nice response, and you just say, "You have a wonderful day at the fair," and just leave it at that. It leaves that impression with them, And you were talking before about Democrats, how they come out in the rural areas. Well, I refer to that, or I have over the years, as closet Democrats, because I know of businessmen, businesswomen, and men who they're Democrats, but they can't promote it because they're afraid to have it impact their business. I understand that. And I says, I appreciate whatever you're able to do. And you go on from there. But that's just a couple little things like that. And to really know that the weather does get to 40 below up here. So, I mean, it can happen.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
John Taylor from Louisa, Virginia. I visited the Twin Oaks community the other year, and it was really fascinating. Welcome from there. John Sonnen in the chat said something really interesting. The left is he's no longer with us, unfortunately. He's left the room, but the left is concerned about humanity, human welfare, and the right reflects the individual's wants and needs. That's why the right does better in rural. That's an oversimplification for sure, but there's some truth in it. And it is actually why taking the high road is not optional for Democrats. Michelle Obama's famous, when they go low, we go high. A lot of people are, have pushed back on that. Like, no, we got to fight down in the dirt too. There's a whole bunch of sayings about that, people can't tell who started it. And, but the thing is, what's that? When you never wrestle a pig down in the dirt, you just get dirty and the pig enjoys it, something like that. But here's the thing about the fact that Democrats are trying their agenda is more complicated, and in a way the higher road by default, which means that the high road is not optional. Fighting down in the dirt with Republicans is a losing strategy always. I mean, Dr. King said, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. I mean, there is an important principle there that taking the high road is just not optional because of what John said. He's not sounding very hopeful in that comment, but because of what he said there, taking the high road is really not optional. SK, did you raise your hand? I don't want to miss you if you did.
Nope.
Okay.
I took it down.
Thank you. No, it's fine. It's totally fine. But thank you for those comments. I see that I'm way behind in the chat. If anybody has, I am scrolling through. If anybody has a question they'd like to voice, though, we don't have any current hands, so now would be the moment. Or if anybody sees something in the chat that really we should talk about, that would be helpful too. But I will scroll through here. There's going to be a lot of work. That is true. Oh, somebody asked about Margot Smith. I'm assuming that your name is pronounced the French way. I'm sorry if the T is supposed to be pronounced. Asked about the FCC. I have to say, I don't know the answer about the FCC. It does not seem like they're doing a great job to me, but that's not my area of expertise. I don't know what's going on and what could be done in terms of kind of reining in the hate and fear mongering on television. I don't know. I like the old cartoon where, there's a guy watching TV and he's how do we deal with all the fear on television and how do we, and he just turns the TV off. I mean, that's the solution I like the best, I suppose. But I hear you that it is. I mean, I lost my father to Fox News. I'm there with you in terms of what can be done. But Kathy, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm curious, when you're doing community works and you're also doing these listening canvases, how do those integrate? Are those kind of separate tracks, and is there timing to that, or?
You meaning the community works and the research that we're doing?
No, I'm sorry. I mean the community works, which I understand is a service, like service to the community. And then there are, I guess you'd call them more formal door knocking, listening canvases. And
Oh,
I'm wondering how those two integrate.
yeah, I see Meredith came off mute. Would you want to jump in, Meredith?
Sure. Well, Community Works is not actively canvassing in the way that the Democrats do or that Cody was describing. But what we are doing is holding community listening sessions and forums, and kind of going from there in terms of bringing folks together from various organizations that are already working in the community. That's one sort of form of a listening session we would do. And then we're moving into doing more just listening sessions across common ground issues. So we did one, I think Skip Halpern was on here. There you go. Yeah, we did one in Page County around rural healthcare access, and it was an information sharing but also a listening session. So that's just one example.
This is SK. Can I just clarify one thing? And I'm thinking that Meredith and our friend up north might agree. I did not want to give the impression that these are not good people. These are the best people you could ever know. They're loving, they're caring, they do anything for a neighbor. Um, it, it, they're, they've just been misinformed.
Yeah,
Um,
I love that point, SK. I actually just preached about that last week. That it is a lot easier to love our local neighbor than our global neighbor. And how do we? I won't go into the how I think the Christians should resolve that, but um, but that is such a tricky thing. How do we love the global neighbor that we don't know? And will never know and don't and can't begin to understand their context in a way that we in the same way or in a similar way that we love our local neighbor where we see their struggles and they're similar to our own. It is a tricky deal. Mike, did you have your
Yes.
yeah,
I just wanted to respond a little to help Kathy out. She was wondering about community input. I've been doing a lot with the community. Well, I'm also a city councilman for a small town, but I've been involved with doing a lot of things. And what is nice about that is you might run into somebody, and I've had this happen. I didn't know who the guy was, had no idea. And he goes, "Oh, yeah." He says, "I saw you at the music in the park last week." And I'm going, I, that's 250 people are in the park watching, listen to music. And now he picks me out because I'm involved. Or he goes, another one that happens, I get every once in a while because I do play Santa and I'm Santa for some community events.
right on, Mike?
And I'll get somebody that'll say, and they go, "Oh, yeah, you really did a nice job." They kind of whisper it. But it's just being involved. So the more that you're involved, I don't talk about politics,
Right.
you know, and to sort of help her out, just do it. Don't expect anything except the satisfaction of helping. And then as that grows, somebody will say, "Oh, yeah, we didn't you help, somebody in a campaign?" And that's how it's another conversation that'll come up with the community. That's all.
Yeah, great, Mike. Thank you. Mary Claire, you're back up. Oh, sorry about the dogs.
That's okay. Just quickly, I put in the chat the link to the story about the Women of Texas Secret Resistance, a group of women that would meet privately in a home and said they were going to book club, but they were really Democrats. And the other piece of it is there are groups like Christians Against Christian Nationalism. That's something I'm really interested in, and there is a lot of work going on in that arena. And so that may be a place for folks to connect. That's it. Thank you.
That's great, Mary Claire. Thank you. Um, I'm so far behind on the chat. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna put my email in the chat though. If I didn't get to somebody's question, please feel free to email me. Um, we're only 30 minutes over time. I'm happy to if people want to stay and chat, I'm happy to do that. Um, but I think the chat is always gonna get ahead of me here. Um, but I just put my email in the chat. If I did not if I did not get to your question, and I'm sure there were some great ones in the chat. I'm sorry we did not get there, but please send me an email. I'm saving the chat so I can go back through, but I won't know how to contact you necessarily. So, feel free to email me at the email I just posted, and I'd be happy to engage on any question that you've got, or comment or concern, any of those. Lovely to see you all. Anybody want the last word? Okay, you all have been great. Thank you so much. Yeah, we'll be posting the video, I think. Yeah. So that should happen. And it was really lovely to spend this time with you all. Thank you for being here. If anybody, I'll keep this thing going until we're all out.
Thanks, Cody.
You bet, Anthony.
Thanks to everybody who participated.
How do I leave?
Oh.
There it is.
Can be
Okay.
tricky on your phone, Mary Claire. Good to see you.
Got it. Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you. This was very helpful.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, the dogs want to make an appearance here. I know. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. Anybody's got hey, David Mack. I know that name. It's fun to see some folks that I recognize from my neck of the woods here. Anybody with some lingering questions? It's just us now. All the supervision is left. Is everybody waiting for... I do this with my students too. I teach online. And so I always wait until everybody's gone and you find out who's walked away from their computer. Anybody with some last comments, questions, concerns? This was John. Go ahead. John,
can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. All right. So I'm the chair of the Cecil County Democratic Party in Maryland, and I can tell you that we have a very blue state and very strong Democratic Party statewide, and just about every elected official in the state of Maryland is a Democrat, at least all the ones that matter.
Right.
But we still have rural counties that are as red as rural Kentucky or Missouri as any place else, and are as deeply Republican. And we tend to be on the front line out here. And I've heard a few people tonight talk about, being outed as a Democrat. Well, you are what you are. You know what I mean? You kind of have to wear it on your sleeve sometimes.
Yeah.
But if you go to the Arts Council, at the local Arts Council, Library Service Committee, like we're talking about Community Works, and you go there and you start getting involved and the subject comes up, you say, I'm a Democrat. It's a lot harder, I have found, for them to call you a Demorat or all anything because you're Steve or Millie or Bob. That's how they know you. That's how they get to know you. That's why I reiterate that thing about being involved in your community was, so important. Conversely, it took a long time for my local committee to figure that out because they were like, I'm not going to get involved with that group because they're all Republicans. And I'm not going to get involved with that group because they're all Republicans, or that person who's a prominent Republican's involved with that group. Well, if you sit around with your own little blue group, you turn into a bunch of blue meanies and you start doing litmus tests to figure out how blue is the guy next to you, and you never engage. So one of the problems, especially with, sort of like these isolated rural communities that I found in Maryland, I'm not going to use it across, but on the Maryland and Eastern Shore, is that you get this core group of true blues, if you know what I mean. And they tend to want to be bomb throwers and not engagers with their community. And that's one of the biggest hurdles that I have had. And that is that you have a group of people with a certain ideology and they want, and their sort of self-righteousness in that, and they want to be bomb throwers and not engage. And the only way to break that cycle is engaging in the community.
Yep.
Because you will find that you have values that you share on education and healthcare and on roads and bridges and health and hospitals and libraries. Because on local issues, they're Republicans and Democrat things doesn't really matter when it comes to that kind of stuff. It just doesn't.
Yep.
And you find that you have common interest and values. And I'm not out to convert the world. I'm not out to make everybody in the world a Democrat. All I need you to do is be converted enough to consider my candidate when you go in the ballot box and vote for a Democrat. You can be a Republican, you can stay a Republican because your dad was a Republican. When you go in the voting booth, remember my candidate, my party, and consider it and vote for the Democrat when you know the Democrat's right. If I can get them to just, I used to have a priest who once said, people would say, oh, the altars are, the pews are full and great for conversion. And he says, might be good for conversion, but it's also great for the offering plate. And in this case, I'm not worried about conversions. I'm more concerned about the level of the count and the offering plate.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, John. I'm sure you're doing some tremendous work there in Maryland. It really is true. Getting involved in the community perfects us and, protects us from stagnation that you're talking about. But it also, there's another way to think about it too, which is if we truly believe in what we've got going on, wouldn't we want to be as involved, just get as much exposure as possible? Right? If we really have got the right thing going on, then the more contact we have, the more we move the needle. The more in contact with people we are, the more we move the needle. That's a great point. I love it.
You got to get off the national soapbox. You know what I mean? Trump. Everything boils down to Trump. Okay, Trump. Trump's bad. We get it. But Trump isn't immortal. He's not going to be around forever. You know what I mean? Thank God he's not immortal. Maybe, I don't know. But he's not immortal. He's not going to be around forever. You know what I mean? And and just like I told everybody in 24 after the election, I says, we'll take it back in 26. It's just the nature of the thing. You got to have thicker skin in politics and understand that this is a long game. And and Trump is falling on his face. And don't worry about those national issues. Worry about the issues that are local. The Democratic Party, we don't have national party. We have county parties, city parties. The party is based as local as it possibly can. That's why every state party is different from every other state party, because it's made up of all the various counties in each state. There's really no national Democratic Party. Each individual state party creates a national committee, but the true organization of the party is at the county level.
Yeah, no, true. And that's where people are engaging. The vast majority of people are engaging at the county level and nowhere else. So I totally agree. Yeah, thanks for that, John. Anybody else before we duck out? Really a pleasure to spend the evening with you all. Have a lovely evening. Hope you'll visit us again. Thanks for being here.